Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back. We have a very special guest for you tonight. Occasionally, in my travels in this strange and mysterious place that I sometimes find myself in, I find some interesting individuals, and tonight's guest is no different. Uh, Looking into him is an interesting rabbit hole in and of itself because tonight's guest, Ken Ammi, has written over 50 books. And not just written books, but done these incredible deep dives into strange and esoteric subjects, things like angels, demons, cherubs, the Nephilim or giants of Bible fame. And of course, uh, he's here tonight to talk about his deep dive and research and study into aliens. He's the author of the most almost more than 50 books, I believe. We'll clarify that with him. And before I forget, the book that I was most interested in talking to him about was 50 Shades of Grey Aliens in Consideration of Aliens, which discusses in great detail the gray aliens, that something we're all familiar with. You can go to Amazon and just search Ken Ammi and see all of his many, many books. If you're interested in religion and philosophy of religion, or some of the strange and esoteric topics of religion, like Lucifer and the devil, and the history of the angels and the war in heaven, his books are filled with things like this. Tonight, we're going to be focusing mostly on aliens, I believe, though. Although I would talk to him for 5 hours about these other subjects. Maybe we could bring him back. We're both got a lot of weird synchronicities here because he and I are both the product of a religious education. And both of us have this fascination with the stranger side, I would say, of the Bible, like the devils and the angels and the Nephilim and strange mysteries of the Bible, and the book of Enoch and the so-called forbidden books of the Bible. He has researched extensively. But let's bring him in here, and we're going to pick his brain tonight all about aliens. Welcome, Ken.
It is an honor and a pleasure, Stephen.
Yeah, mine too. When we first talked, I didn't know that you had written so many books. You're like one of the most prolific authors in mystery land that I've ever seen, right?
It's therapeutic, honestly, because if I'm going to research something, I'm going to go to ridiculous depths of detail. And then my head is just stuffed. It's as big as a gray alien's head. And the only way to just make peace is just to put it all together and type it out. And there goes a book. And yes, I got it out. It's very cathartic after a ridiculous amount of research to go, it's out there. There it is. I typed it out.
And bringing it into the real world, right?
Yes. And that
Yeah.
also forces you to put all those crazy puzzle pieces together because, as it has been said very often, is the best way to learn something is to teach it. So if I'm going to tell you, hey, here's what I think about these subjects, I better dissect and unpack and be able to explain in a way that would make sense to somebody who's outside of my head.
So what is it? I always ask my guests this. The first question that I have for you is, what is it that got you started down all these crazy rabbit holes, and what has kept you here for so long?
That is a very interesting question because there are those moments in life where we go, wait a minute, there's just something beyond this veil, right? Uh, for me, eh, I distinctly remember I was in single digits of age, and where I was born, we didn't have the tooth fairy. Okay, we had the los ratoncitos, we had the teeth mice, and same function. It's just you guys get a fairy, we get vermin. Uh,
That's a strange thing, yeah.
so, I mean, obviously, I was a little kid. I was told, yeah, the little mice come and get your teeth and leave you money. But then one day I found out that's not true. It's actually just my parents doing it. And I was devastated. Like, I was like, wait a minute. I was told that this certain thing was a fact. And now I'm being told I was deceived. I mean, childishly deceived. It wasn't like earth-shattering, but to me it was, because it was like, wait a minute, I had a certain view of reality and now it was shattered. So what is the real truth, right? What else is there about which I'm being told X and X is not the case? So what is the case? And that honestly, and that's where I can pinpoint my turning to true and honest skepticism, right? And I always make sure to explain. A lot of people call themselves skeptics, but they're really just cynics. Where a cynic will say, or a skeptic will say, "I won't believe until," where a cynic will say, "I won't believe." Period. Right?
Yeah.
True and honest skeptic, right? Like the Apostle Thomas, who said, "I'm not going to believe until I see." Well, okay, that's true and honest skepticism, because he was told by the others, "Hey, we saw it." He's like, "Well, I want to see also." And so, thinking back to, I don't know, progressing a few years, going to the public library. You know, a lot of you youngsters don't know what that is. It's like a building full of these things called books.
Yeah, I had to teach my 6-year-old son. He's like, the whole building's filled with books, Dad. Like it was interesting. But I've been trying
And
to
you have
take
the
him
little
more.
tiny drawers you pull out with the index cards. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
had to explain to him not everything is on the internet, son. Sometimes you have to go somewhere to look for information, and I'm trying to teach him to do that more than just right click
yes.
everything.
And on top of it, by the way, I would have to ride my bicycle many, 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 many blocks to get there and back. So guess what? I got out and I got exercise. Wow. Who would have thunk it?
And as a kid, that's a good thing to do. I
Oh,
can imagine
yeah,
your parents didn't mind you going to the library
that's right.
instead of staying out of trouble. I did a
Yeah.
lot of that when I was a kid. And not just the
So,
local. I went to the one that was closest to me, and then like you, I would get on my bike and go to the further ones to see what they had.
right. So back in those days, 11 years old or so, sixth grade, I would always read the books about cryptozoology and aliens and UFOs and witchcraft, just anything outlandish, paranormal, all those Tiny Life books about the mysteries of the world and all those. That's what really fascinated me. And so it's no surprise that I'm kind of still at it. And that's why, for instance, when it comes to the Bible, that's why I've mostly focused on, guess what I call systematic biblical paranormology.
Yeah, you've
And
got your own. I heard some of your
yeah,
talks, and I thought it was so funny. Ken was so confused by his own field of research. Well, not confused, but like you've had your own sort of slant and field of research that you just invented your own term for it,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Paranormology.
Right. And one person that interviewed me, he introduced me by saying I'm one of the leading voices in the field of systematic biblical paranormology. And I said, well, yeah, it's
You're
easy
the
to
only
be one of
one.
the leading voices when you're like the only one.
Yeah. And so the study began for you of biblical things, but eventually, or you had an interest though in aliens and cryptozoology.
Before, yeah.
Yeah. So your recent book, you really delve into the sort of cultural phenomenon known as the gray
Yeah.
aliens. Can we
It's
get
not
into that?
really a new book. It's a few years old, but regardless, you know, it's interesting because I mean I can't say I've kept up with the field ever since I was in sixth grade. Definitely not. And all the newer modern guys don't really interest me because there's a lot of really well researched people who are dealing with them. So I kind of, I'll let them deal with the new kids on the block. So generally, when I set out to write a book, just like any author, you set up parameters, right? I'm going to write about this. I'm not going to go beyond that because that would be out of scope or too much or out of context. So you set up parameters. I'm going to write about this, and there you go. So I call that like a rifle approach. One bullet, nice little hole in the front, maybe a mess in the back. But with this book, it was more like a shotgun approach. I just went in every possible direction I could go. And so one of the things I wanted to start with here, like I mentioned to you as we just doing this show, is to think categorically or systematically about what kind of phenomena are we even talking about? Because if we start a discussion about aliens or UFOs without really stopping to define our terms and understand the categories of phenomena we're dealing with, it's really easy to just make a big old mess of things, and you'll have people meaning different things by those terms. So if we could attempt to
Oh, well, when I say aliens, I mean intelligent life forms from other planets or solar systems,
okay,
biological, organic
right. And
beings.
so that's been one of the traditional definitions, but of course others say, well, because first aliens claimed that they were from our solar system, and then we started exploring our solar system, and they're like, yeah, there doesn't seem to be nothing here. Well, oh no, we're actually from further away, we're from another galaxy. Then we started getting peeks at other galaxies and saying, yeah, I'm not sure that biological life could exist there. And finally they keep retreating to where we're actually from another dimension, or we're actually from another universe, so it's conveniently inaccessible to you humans. After you've started figuring out we're not where we said we were, now we're
Yeah, the early contactees, they would say they were from Saturn or Venus,
that's
which
right.
we later would find out there's no way they were from
Yeah,
Saturn or Venus. That doesn't make sense. And then you're right, later it became we're from another star system.
right. So they keep getting further and further away until now they're just inaccessible. They're just beyond our capability to explore, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing I wanted to see if we could screen share, and I would just go over some of the issues of category.
Yeah, you've got like Ken is a real stickler for information, but I love that about him from the presentations and the talks that I have seen of his. He likes to categorize and, make sure everybody is on the same page with the definition, because you're right. Some people would say alien and they really mean a whole range of things. They could mean
That's
some
right.
kind of spiritual interdimensional beings, organic beings, time travelers. Sometimes this term alien is used with the too broad a brush. I agree.
So I'm going to see if we can manage to start the screen share.
Yeah, here, I'm going to add that right now.
Let me know when it's up, because obviously when I'm looking at my slides, I can't see the
Yeah,
video.
it's up shared on the screen right now. We have a screen that says aliens and then an
Yeah.
arrow, aliens and
Okay.
UFOs and
So,
UFOs to aliens. Yeah.
right. So this is a basic concept that there's, if I say let's talk about aliens and UFOs, I might be making a big old mess, because those two phenomena are main categories. They're not necessarily related, because there's people who claim to have experience with aliens but never seen a UFO. And there's people who say they've seen UFOs but never had an experience with an alien. So that alone lets you know that those can be two completely different categories, right? And yet there is a third, slightly subcategory where people claim, well, I've had experience with both. Okay, so then that's a different category altogether. Yeah. So then I'm going
Sure.
to advance the slide. Let me see if that, can you see that now?
Yeah. Now we have alien craft, UFOs,
In
nuts and
this
bolts.
case, right? Okay, so the category of UFO, and nowadays we would say UAV or UAP, or whatever. We're going to
I
go.
still say UFO. I don't care what the CIA wants to call it.
So then we're looking at, that's a main category under which we can subcategorize. Some would say, well, they're actual alien craft, and if that's the case, then there's a subcategory that it could be a nuts and bolts, a three-dimensional object, or it may be energy orbs or some kind of morphing thing. Okay. When people say UFOs, it might actually be an atmospheric phenomena like clouds of ball lightning. It could be just aircraft, birds, balloons, satellites. It could be just straight up hoaxes, or maybe secret government tech, which you can see gets us back to the aircraft issue. And I mean, that's just very mundane, commonly known, of course. People
Mhm.
start reporting seeing black triangular UFOs, and then a little bit later we find out about the stealth fighter and the stealth bomber, for instance. So, okay, that's just very brief as far as
No,
subcategories
I
of
like
what.
this. This actually makes a lot of sense because UFOs
Okay,
can be a lot of things. And you're right. We
right,
got this. If they're alien craft, there's a subcategory, and they could be what you're saying here: atmospheric, clouds, ball lightning, aircraft, birds, balloons, satellite hoaxes. Or the big one for me is secret government tech. But you're
right.
right. We have all these categories. And
Right.
again, you're correct in pointing out that when people use the word UFO, it's a pretty broad term. It could mean all these things, right?
And then likewise, under the main category, aliens. Well, maybe the claim is that they come from within our universe, as we just mentioned, our solar system, or even the outer reaches of space, of our known universe. Or it could be from alternate realities, multiverses, other dimensions that are part of our universe, or maybe spirits, angelic, demonic realm. Or maybe they're they claim to be bioorganisms, much like we are, or just slightly different in terms of our physical makeup. And you see that I wrote there spirits or angels or demons. Again, that would be more like a spirit realm type of thing. Or it could be straight up government ops. That might be something interesting to get into because I have some examples of that. Or just a straight up hoax. So again, what do we mean? You're saying alien, I'm saying alien. What do we actually mean when we say that term? Could be various things. And then
Sure.
there's the issue of the human experience. Because when some people claim that they're experiencers, maybe they had a dream, maybe it was a hallucination, maybe it was hypnotic suggestion or an actual close encounter. And that's why we end up with all these concepts of experiencers, abductees, and channelers. So yeah, we can, if you want, we can get into why I use the term shades of gray aliens. But that's basically it as far as just a taste of how to start breaking down this phenomena into understandable and categorizable things that we can then unpack and say, okay, I'm actually talking about this subcategory. When I say this, I'm talking about that.
Sure. And I think you're right to separate so many because it's a complex problem
Right.
and a complex mystery. What are these things? And I've always found that if you have a really complex problem, the best thing to do is to break it down to the smaller, manageable
Right.
bits, right? But you've done extensive research into the gray aliens specifically, right? Because that seems to be when a typical person talks about aliens, that's generally the image that people conjure up in their mind.
Correct. And part of the issue, by the way, with that book title, 50 Shades of Gray Aliens, is it Gray or Grey? I had to decide, by the way,
Does that
which
matter?
spell.
Isn't that both just the spelling of the word gray?
It is, but from what I recall, the E is more preferred by the Brits, don't you know?
Well, they
You
always
know,
got to change things, right? Because we're stupid Americans, so they have to have their own spelling and things.
true, but they would say that about North Americans. But so you might recall that Whitley Strieber refers to, he doesn't say aliens, he says visitors or he says grays, right?
Or others, he says a lot too, I
Others,
noticed.
okay.
Yeah,
But if you can recall the cover of his book Communion, that gray alien looking thing
sure.
isn't gray.
Oh,
It's more like a weird tan color. So I asked him, well, why is that? If you're constantly talking about grays, he had that painting commissioned. So I said, why isn't that one gray? And he just said he doesn't know. That's what he saw. Okay,
yeah,
well,
that's kind of bizarre, right?
so yeah, I would say grays are definitely the poster child of this phenomena of whatever they are from wherever they are.
Yeah,
Definitely.
just to remind my audience, I'm going to share that.
There you go.
Share that. It
So
seems like definitely that image. I remember that image being like burned into everybody's head. That's from his book and what an alien looks like. Maybe a large part of the cultural phenomenon of this stuff comes from just his book being so influential.
well, I'll tell you a little story about reading that book. So I would go to this local coffee shop where you could just go pick up a book off the shelf, read it while you were there, and then put it back. And so I was reading Communion, and one night I was reading in there how he's talking about that symbolism common to abductees are triangles and eagles. Okay. I got home that night and I looked at the bottle of the ginger soda that was my favorite back then. And guess what was on it that I'd never noticed before? It's an eagle within a triangle.
Oh, that's a little bizarre.
That's what
Yeah.
that means. I'm just saying that's what happened. I was like, okay.
So, did you get any insight into why they're both called the gray aliens and usually depicted as gray? Is it just because of witness testimony, always saying they had gray skin, or usually saying they had gray skin, or?
Well, I mean, really, you'd probably go back to what were described as uh, little green men. And somehow it just changed to that they were tan colored or gray or really thin skin that was almost see through. But now, what I'm going to go back to screen sharing, and we'll actually get into that part of it then, because
Sure, yeah, and I appreciate you bringing a whole presentation here. I wasn't expecting that, but that's great. It's always
yeah,
great to have something to share for the audience. I'm always getting my balls busted because I don't do enough slides, Ken. I
uh,
got to learn to do PowerPoint better. People like the slides, man.
so what I started wondering is, yeah, why have those become the poster child? And essentially, I don't know how I hit upon it, but the second I started researching that, I instantly found the answer in the late 1800s, and then I just moved forward in time. So let me show you this. Okay, H.G. Wells wrote an article or an essay called "The Man of the Year Million," 1893. He wrote that, and these are illustrations based on his depiction. Now, what he was
Oh, I'm
talking.
sorry, I didn't share it. Yeah, this
Oh,
I remember doing some of my own research and finding this to be one of the original sort of archetypes that may have started it all, you
right.
know?
But there's something very, very important is that H.G. Wells was not talking about aliens. He was imagining what are human beings going to look like a million
Yeah,
years
this
from
book is
now?
about time travelers, really. Yeah.
Well, this was an essay. So what he was saying is in the distant future, machinery, right? Technology was going to be doing so much with us, we wouldn't really need robust bodies anymore. So our bodies would kind of be shrivelly and, puny. But
Which
then we would have
coincidentally is what many of the gray aliens look like, all spindly, and that's
exactly right.
yeah, that's the
So
explanation many people give, is that they live in a super technological society and they
right,
don't need to be as physical as we do or have in the past.
yeah. And so then based on like Malthusian or probably Lamarckian evolution that was popular in the late 1800s, he figured the more intellectual, the bigger the brain. So the bigger the brain, the bigger the skull. So there you got a big head. And then diminutive features, because he said, you see how they're dunked in that fluid? He said, we wouldn't really bother consuming solid foods anymore. We would dip into these vats of fluid and kind of absorb our nutrition. So you wouldn't need big mouths. You would,
Well, that's
and
interesting because that's another thing that people say about gray aliens is that they absorb. I've heard many references that they absorb nutrients through their skin. People claim it's adrenochrome or something, or they harvest it from
oh, that's
us.
a rabbit hole right there. Let me tell
Yeah.
you about it.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to throw this in. I wrote a book reviewing Stephen King's story It, like Pennywise, and I have an entire chapter about how he and other fictional writers or alleged fiction are actually telling us that aliens are here to absorb us as nutrition or a form of nutrition in terms of adrenochrome and all that stuff. But yeah, that's more of a side note than anything.
Yeah, that's its own rabbit hole, sure is.
Where people are getting these ideas, they're getting them
It's
from this.
interesting how many of them come from this one essay of
Yeah,
H.G. Wells, because we have the big head, we have the diminutive stature and lack of physicality, and we
right,
also have this idea that they absorb nutrients in a liquid form and not eat like us.
right.
Yeah, interesting.
And so let's move forward a bit. This is from a book titled Atidorpa. It's really Aphrodite backwards, okay? It's hard to pronounce. That's what the guy did. It's Aphrodite backwards.
See, I told you they like slides. Somebody's saying more slides.
Oh, okay. Well,
You're the
we'll get to
guy.
and so the way that these beings are depicted, again, it's a book of fiction, but less than 5 feet in height, skin the color of light blue putty, his forehead extended in an unbroken plane from the crown to cheekbone, and the chubby tip of an abortive nose without nostrils formed a short projection. There was no semblance of an eye, or there were no sockets. So again, very gray alien-like, with the exception of the eyes. This is what's being described of these beings. Okay, let's progress forward. So I should explain. What I did is I looked into the realms of the golden era of sci-fi fiction and comic books, and to see what kind of stories that they were telling us. Because you go from somebody writing a speculative essay like H.G. Wells, who then ends up writing fiction about it, and then other people pick up on it and they start making their own stories, right? So then this is an interesting
Oh
one.
yes, Aleister Crowley's.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is 1919, and Aleister Crowley is saying that he was in contact with this entity called Lamb. And if you notice, it has very tiny eyes, but right above it, you can see sort of shades of what would become the more almond shaped type, huge gray alien eyes that are so typical. Okay. And this is Starfire. It's a publication of the Typhonian OTO, the Order Templi Orientis. So another occult group, same kind of thing. I mean, here they are depicting what is in essence another gray alien type of
Big
thing.
headed being, yeah.
Yeah.
And I have
Now,
often wondered if the big head is just our own belief that aliens from other star systems would be worlds more intelligent than us. And maybe that's why we imagine them with big heads,
well,
right?
exactly. That's what I was talking about in terms of Wells. He was applying the popular evolutionary theories of his day and saying that if the brain grows, then the skull has to grow. We know that's not the case anymore, but that was popular back in the late 1800s. That's what would happen. So then here you have Amazing Stories, 1927, the Machine Man of Ardathia. Okay, so notice that this is a man. Okay, but look at him, spindly little body, huge head, right? That's what we're tracking here, is this concept. Because at one point in my research, I ran across like 4 different people in like 3 different circles who all started saying the same thing, and I'm sure we've all heard it, which is that aliens are not really alien. What they are is human beings visiting us from the future.
From the future. That's another big explanation for the UFO phenomenon.
That's
I
right.
have a
So
friend, I have a friend, Ken, who is absolutely convinced that it's not aliens, it's time travelers from the future. And I'm not sure exactly why he's so adamant, but he is adamant. That's his theory. They're time travelers from the future. And he thinks that they're anthropologists, that they're coming back in time to study us at this point in history for some reason, and then they
yeah,
go back and they're more fully informed of their own history somehow.
right.
It's
Some other, I mean,
mind-bending theory, but it could be true.
anybody can plug in any type of theory. Other people say that they're coming back to warn us about destroying the planet because in their future they're so polluted they want to fix it ahead of time, or that their genetics have diminished so much that they're having mutational problems and they want to come back. I mean, whatever. But think back to H.G. Wells. Where does this idea come from? Back to H.G. Wells. Uh, where do we get the idea that these beings are humans from the future? Well, from H.G. Wells. Here's another one, Wonder Stories. Again, the man who evolved, not the alien, the man. And what does the man who evolved look like? Well, there you go. Evolved to have a ridiculously huge head. So again, we're tracking this concept of that humanity in the future is going to look like that. And they're telling that story over and over and over ever since H.G. Wells. Okay. Here's another one, Strange Adventures. And look what is being said here. One more jolt of my evolution ray, Captain Comet, and you'll be a giant bodiless brain, just like me.
Yeah, that does reminds me of the leader from the Hulk comics who had a big head too. You know,
But
and yeah,
notice,
there is this concept in comics where they had some sort of device that could accelerate. There was a character called the High Evolutionary, and he would take, like monkeys and make an army out of them by accelerating their evolution or something. And this is a similar concept, but this is a man turning into a future man
that's
that just
right.
so
And
happens to look like an alien. Yeah.
there you go. As you see, it's the same story, just being repackaged and repackaged and repackaged, right? Now we go to, here's two examples, 1934. If tomorrow comes, A Tale of Two Worlds. Okay, tomorrow, looking into the future, and guess what we see? Typical gray alien. And then, as we saw earlier, I'd forgotten I had this in there, 1989, Screamer with Communion. Whatever those things might be to him. Okay, 1935, Atlas All Thinking. So here's the concept of this being that is just all thinking, and so it has a huge brain and ergo skull. Okay, nothing about aliens yet, nothing. I mean, not thus far. It's just all futuristic. Okay, even the Wizard of Oz got in on
Yeah, this is one of my I don't know why, but I love that scene of the Wizard of Oz, of the
Oh,
illusion of the great and powerful
right.
Oz that he would project onto smoke. And believe it or not, I played a lot with video projectors and smoke machines, and this is fun stuff to play with.
So then what is behind the curtain, right?
Normal man, yeah.
And now let me throw in this little factoid. So if you watch the movie based on Whitley Strieber, the movie called Communion, and if you watch Fire in the Sky, right, based on Travis
Travis Walton.
Walton, there's an interesting scene in both movies. So in Communion, Strieber is face to face with a gray alien, and then the bottom half of its face turns out to be a plate that is removed, and behind it is some sort of, I don't know, slimy reptilian thing.
Insectoid reptilian looking
Right.
thing. Yeah, I remember that.
Right. And so Strieber character in that movie says, oh, this is like one of those Russian dolls. It's just layers and layers. You're never going to actually show us who you are, right? Okay, then in the Walton movie, Fire in the Sky, he comes face to face with a gray alien, but he turns out he realizes it's just a spacesuit. Okay, so that tells us that this gray alien look is not actually what it is. It's not an actual being, except I asked Whitley Strieber about this, and I asked Travis Walton about this, and they both told me the same thing. That's just Hollywood movie stuff. They both said that was not their experience.
Interesting.
I mean, there might be still something to it, but I just wanted to throw that out there, that I thought that was really interesting and very coincidental, but they both said, no, we didn't experience that. Okay, now, and look at the title here. The world of tomorrow. So again, we're looking at a future person, and okay, it has a regular type body, but we're starting to see that head's getting bigger. You know? That head's about to pop. So again,
Yeah.
same thing, same story, being told and retold. Even here's Superman, Jimmy Olsen, and he's saying, do my bidding, Superman, or I'll turn my kryptonite eyes on full power. And then Superman saying, we act, and with us super intelligent brain, Jimmy was uh, has me at his mercy. Sorry, that is really super small font. But look at Superman saying that Jimmy became super intelligent. So what does that mean? That he's got a
He
bigger
can
head,
control
right?
minds. He's got a bigger head. Yeah.
And he's developed extra capabilities, right? Because now he's got these superpowers. I know you're into the people that claim superpowers,
Hey,
and
listen, everybody needs a hobby, and mine is listening to people talk about their superpowers that they never prove they have. Okay?
and so at the bottom corner there, you see it says the super brain of Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah, that's
And then
interesting.
another where now Batman himself is on it. And guess what? It's Superman. I said Batman. Wow.
It's Superman.
Superman.
Yeah.
And look at that, of the future. So what is Superman of the future?
Big
Big old
brain.
head. Big old head, right?
Well, isn't there some evolutionary evidence that that is the way that we're going? Larger cranium, larger brain. I think I read somewhere there is, right? There's some evidence that that's where we're headed.
I I like that pun. Where we're headed.
I didn't even realize I did that. See?
Yeah. Well, I don't know because, like I said, that was definitely a fashionable theory back in the late 1800s. Um, I know if you look at Neanderthals, they had bigger brains and therefore bigger heads. So I'm not sure if that's the way it works, but I'm just saying this is what the fiction writers were playing off of constantly. So now we have
It's
this black.
amazing how many examples you found of this
Yeah,
big-headed human
yeah.
phenomenon. Yeah.
And it says, I'm a swell head, physically and mentally. Right? Even Venom and, well, Venom actually is an alien, period.
Yeah, a
And
symbiote
sometimes
alien.
versions
Yeah.
of Spider-Man are very very alien-like. I mean, look at those yeah, masks. The eyes are just gigantic, right? And here's the outer limits. The visit from where? From the future. Future, okay? And same thing. The year 3000. The man's coming back. So it says a white smocked, strange looking little man, by the way, suddenly appears on every channel, on every television set around the world. He speaks his voice is translated into the language of each country. The man is broadcasting from the year 3000 AD, the people of today's world. And that's what we've been talking about all along. Now we come to an interesting one. I included this one because it struck me very oddly. The movie AI,
AI.
right, about
Yeah, that was
artificial
a great
intelligence.
movie.
And
And
this
that
was
was
a
the twist at the end because it was
right.
all about artificial intelligence and robots. And then at the end, we get aliens, which was
Okay, now hold on,
great.
because see, that's exactly why I included this. Because when I watched that movie, I go, "Oh wow, these are aliens." But it turns out that what these are supposed to be is
People from the future.
silicon-based AI. They're not supposed to be aliens.
Oh, you're right. You're right. It's been a while
Yeah,
since I saw that.
you
Yeah.
don't. Well, no, you don't get that in the movie. This is just behind the scenes. Even Steven Spielberg describing that that's what these were meant to be. So I thought that was fascinating because, again, we have a sort of very typical gray alien look when they're not supposed to be aliens at all. They're artificial intelligence. So now I'm gonna back out of this just to make a few statements. So my point in all of this is, at least from what we would call a sociological perspective, what we have is a basic idea laid out by H.G. Wells, off of which many people played, and they told it and retold it and retold it, which is all the same. It's about humans from the future, humans when they evolved millions of years into the future, what they would look like. And then I'm thinking possibly because of the issue of how many times can you retell the same old story, all of a sudden these comic book and sci-fi authors said, you know what, forget all that. We're going to keep the premise, the basic core concept, but we're just going to start claiming that they're aliens from another planet or another galaxy or another universe. the dimension. And that's all it takes to make the switch, right? So how could we freshen up this story? It's just the same thing. They're more advanced, and that's why they look the way they do, and they're from wherever they are. They've had more time to evolve than we have, or whatever, or they're coming from the future. It's the same thing. It's just now we're going to start claiming that they're aliens instead of just future humans. That's all it took.
Yeah, interesting that there's so many cultural references. And I agree with you. It might just be a case of a lazy writer looking around for what he could make his aliens look at. And there's already all of these precedents in culture that preceded the idea that aliens look like that. And so they stole it and modified it for their own stories, right?
Right, because that's been my point. I mean, I just took us through like just over a century's worth of examples from pop culture, and that's what they're saying is they were telling one story and they're still telling it. They just switched the category of the characters. That's pretty much it. And then I was going to throw in some of this stuff I thought would be interesting about how why refer to pop culture or sci-fi or comic books when we're supposed to be dealing with a real life phenomena? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. So one is the concept of normative fiction, which is sort of tied at the hip to what's known as predictive programming, which is when authors who are allegedly writing fiction are actually pushing real life worldview philosophy type ideas, but they're doing it under the guise of fiction so that your guard is down, your intellectual guard is down, and you're more willing to just absorb ideas because you're saying, big deal, it's just a movie, whatever. Yeah, but they're telling you things that they actually believe. And then, so if you look at something like this, the image on the left was based on a description of an experience with an alien that somebody had. But the one in the middle and the right are some of the sci-fi TV shows that were around at the time, and that's how they depicted aliens. So it doesn't go.
Yeah, I wonder which came first, right?
Well, right. It doesn't take much to say, well, look, this cheesy sci-fi TV show and movie, we're depicting them in, old-timey type uniforms with this sash across the vest, and well, then somebody finds that so impactful that they end up claiming, or maybe even who knows what, I don't know, hallucinating or dreaming or had some kind of illusion or delusion. I don't know. I'm just saying, when you look at the historical context or the cultural context, you find stuff like this, or same here. Um, there's one of the illustrations based on Barney and Betty Hill. It's the same thing. It's one of these uniforms with a sash across, and also two other people who claim to have had experiences with aliens. They're all describing what was popular in pop culture in their day. Same. I mean, it goes on and on. Betty Anderson, right? Just so many of the depictions of what the aliens looked like back in that day basically appearing to be based on whatever they were watching in the movies and TV shows. And same thing here.
You got Mork from Ork in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was a little kid, I watched that, or I watched reruns of that on like VHF. I used to love that until it got to Jonathan Winters, and then it was terrible. It got worse and worse as the show went on. Yeah, but
yeah. So like the three images
show.
underneath are from TV shows and movies of the day where they have these uniforms with an upside down triangle in the chest. And the two images above are supposed actual experiences with aliens. So I'm saying, well, look, I don't know what actually happened. I'm just saying it's just too much of a coincidence that people are seeing this stuff depicted in movies and TV shows and they're claiming to have had a real experience. Likewise with this, from the one on the bottom, obviously from To Serve Man, Twilight Zone, and honestly, I don't recall what the other one is, but same kind of thing with this robe with the raised collar. This also is from Betty and Barney Hill. So it's the illustrations of what they claim they saw, um, compared to the way that the movie depicted them. You know, kind of
Thanks,
big,
Lord Ludicrous. I
yeah,
appreciate
big.
that. And people are saying you have a great presentation already. So that's good news. Yeah, I love to wonder about this. Like, it's a chicken and egg thing. Like,
Yeah.
which came first, the abductions of these people who really saw these things, or the TV shows that depicted them, and then they filled in the blanks, maybe of strange experience through their own cultural lens. Because you know this better than most, but back in the day before aliens were talked about, when people had these sort of experiences, it was a devil or it was an angel or fairy folk or something. And eventually that changed to alien for these same kind
Okay,
of
so now
experiences.
that's something I would really like to get into in just a minute here.
Sure.
Let me just,
Sorry, I don't mean to get ahead of you
no,
here.
it's okay. That actually, I'm glad because that we're thinking in the same direction. So that's important. This is just an early attempt at what we would call photoshopped hoax from 1950. I mean,
I
obviously, it's
remember this photo. Do you know how many people have sent me that photo and asked me what I thought about it? And then I have to tell them the origins of it, you
yeah.
know? Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I say it's an early form of Photoshop because obviously you can see from the original photo to a slightly different angle, and someone just slapped an alien-looking thing on there. And same thing with this one. It's just a couple guys with an old-timey baby carriage, and somebody just manipulate the image. I mean, this has been going on for a long, long time.
Yeah. It's just made, but Photoshop made these things a lot easier. And yesterday we did a show on the coming swarm that's going to destroy, it's going to be terrible, Ken. This AI image generators. People just did a hoax with AI generated images claiming they were from Roswell 1947. We pretty quickly definitively proved that they were from an AI image generator.
Wow.
So it used to be people really had to work to make these fakes, cutting things out and putting it on a slide, on a negative, and then redevelop the picture. With Photoshop, it got worse, and now with these AI image generators, it's going to be terrible. There's going to be so many fake photos flooding the internet now. It's just so easy. You just put in it is fun. You just put in a phrase. You could put in like alien crash landing in a desert and it'll show you a bunch of pictures that look
Wow.
like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So now back to the point you were making. So if we had to just lay it out, what do I think? I mean, this was just one of the perspectives I had, which is how come you're able to so clearly trace this as an idea sociologically through pop culture and all of that? Okay, but now um, I would say if you were to ask me, do I think that there are quote unquote aliens from other planets or galaxies or dimensions or universes? I'd say, for me, that's like way, way down the line as an option. Okay, let's set that way, way down the line because there are more mundane things in the here and now that we can actually verify first, which is like we talked about earlier. Some of it is straight up government ops. Everybody knows about that. It's no great conspiracy. It's just well known. Part of it is maybe what we would call accidental, again, like seeing the stealth bomber and fighter without knowing what they were. And then we get into another issue, which is I'll give you the example of Whitley Strieber. So as I would listen to him, I would notice every now and then he would mention his family relationships with CIA and military. I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm going to just lock that away in the back of my head.
I noticed that one time too. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that may turn into something, maybe not. And then one day he does a whole talk straight up saying, hey, I was a victim of MK Ultra mind control program. Now, was he? I have no idea, but I'm just saying that's what he says. And so that makes a lot more sense, and it's a lot more commonsensical and a lot more mundane than that he's having experiences with whatever they are, right? So let me unpack that a little bit. When we're talking about MK was actually a slew of experiments. Ultra, in particular, was about mind control. So what he's claiming is that these CIA spooks would literally run experiments on him to try to mind control him. So now, when I thought about some of the tales he's told, such as this, he says, well, at one point, the visitors recognized that he was really freaked out by their huge eyes. And so one of them appeared to him one day wearing some of those like ridiculously large plastic sunglasses that you would buy like at the state fair, you know? And I'm
That's
like, okay,
bizarre. Yeah.
what would seem more to be the case, that these ultra dimensional beings did that, or that some jerk at the CIA had this guy hypnotized and put on those ridiculous glasses to make him think that he was seeing something that really not there, right? Or then he talks about how, yes, he recognizes he was a victim of mind control experimentation, but he does still know for a fact that he's been having experiences with whatever they are from wherever they are, because this is what he actually said, because people he knew who ran into him on the days where he had those experiences noted that he was agitated. I'm like,
That doesn't
okay,
make
hold
any
on a
sense.
second
Yeah.
now. Okay, if you had an experience with whatever they are from wherever they are, I could see how you'd end up agitated, but I could also see you'd end up agitated if some jerks from the CIA were messing with your brain, you know? Yeah.
Do you
And
have a
that's
moment? Let
really
me
different.
let me address something real quickly. Mr. DB Cooper asks, ask actual citizens if he ever accepted cash payments from Secure Team 10 when his channel was called Lion's Ground. Investigate that, Steve. Boom. And here's what I'm aware of. I'm aware that I had a conversation with Heathcliff about this. To the best of my recollection, and I'll check back in with him. Secure Team 10 sent him unsolicited PayPal donations, and I believe his perception was that those donations were a sort of bribe to get him to shut up and be nice about all the fakes and frauds that he was pushing, Secure Team was pushing, and to no longer cover him. But he did keep the money, and then he kept covering him. That's my best recollection of it. But thank you, Mr. DB Cooper. I will certainly check in with him and see if I can get further clarification of that. And thank you for your kindness. 100 Mexican. Thank you. So I had a chance to interview Whitley Strieber, and I was a little starstruck, I will admit, because I grew up with that book, and I had just rewatched the movie coincidentally with Christopher Walken at my cabin because the power was out, and I had the DVD around or something, and I watched it on the laptop, and then some weird coincidence, he happened to contact me about a guest that was on my show that he had also had some interaction with or something. He wanted to clarify something that she was saying. So I asked him for an interview, and we did the interview. And by the way, I'm going to do another one with him. So, if you have any questions, you can certainly give them to me off air. I've always been fascinated with him, but equally cautious, because before he made huge, cultural impact with this communion book. He was a fiction writer, and to some extent he still is, I believe. He wrote The Howling and a bunch of different horror novels that were got Hollywood deals even. So I've always been a little cautious of him. And also, I had what can only be described as a similar experience to him on hallucinogens once. I thought I was seeing beings. I thought they were talking to me. I thought I was seeing multiple species of beings. I didn't know if they were like interdimensional. And after that experience, I went, maybe somebody dosed him, or something that he ate or did spiked his DMT levels, which could cause that naturally somehow. Or, I mean, there's a lot more explanations, but it is interesting that he never said these were aliens visiting me from another planet. He just talked about the experiences that he had, and he didn't know. He called them the others. He called them the visitors. You know, could they be interdimensional? Could they be just a? He even admits they could all have been a product of his own mind. He doesn't know. You know, it's a mystery.
Yeah,
But that's he's an interesting guy, but always
absolutely.
cautious about him as well, because
Yeah,
it seemed like after the success of Communion, then he wrote a whole series of books and had new experiences to write about. And I found that a little coincidental. You know, it's kind of like this other person, Daniel Brinkley, who he wrote a very famous book about near-death experiences. And then I think when that money dried up, suddenly he died again. And then he wrote another book about his second death. And I think we're up to 4 times that guy died and wrote a book. So these people are suspect to me. In
you
your,
know what? We're
yeah,
on the same page because that's something I've noticed about Strieber is whenever he's becoming sort of irrelevant, he has convenient memories of things that put him back on top in a manner of speaking. So, for instance, if you remember way back when people started reporting that a face had been discovered on Mars, all of a sudden Strieber says, "Oh, you know what? I just remembered. I saw that face way, way, way back because I was on Mars, and I mean, I saw it, right?" So it's like if you find a way to kind of uh, stick yourself into the middle of whatever's hip at the moment. And so, oh, one more story though about the CIA connection and whether he was really mind controlled. So, if you look on whatever YouTube for a video called something like "Interview with an Alien," it's allegedly a real life video of a natural alien that was kept at Area 51, and wouldn't you know it, shucks, the alien happened to die right in the middle of shooting that video. Too bad. But if you look at that video, it's obviously a puppet. I mean, it's obviously a puppet. Okay. But
yeah,
I watched the documentary that was made and brought that up, and it said we contacted Whitley Strieber to see if he had any thoughts to share about it, but that he was so freaked out by seeing it, he couldn't even appear on camera to talk about it. But that he said, if that's fake, then whoever made it knows how they move. And I'm like, dude, how they move? That's a
yeah,
puppet.
and you're. It's interesting. You're talking about this alien interview,
Let
actually.
me just finish the thought right there. Just
Sure, sorry.
one more sentence because it made me realize look, again, this is more mundane than it would seem. To me, it's obvious some CIA spooks were trotting out a puppet and making him think he was interacting with this visitor, and it's really just a puppet. And the guy is so messed. I mean, it breaks my heart. It is so messed up in so many different ways. Now he sees a video of a puppet like that that's obviously just a puppet, and he's so freaked out he can't even bring himself to appear on camera to discuss it. So I'm saying that this is real, just mundane stuff, and that we can make sense of in terms of what has been revealed. Like MK Ultra is not some kind of wild conspiracy. CIA came right out and admitted it. So again, whether Streamer went through that, I don't know. I'm just saying it fits the bill. So go ahead.
I was just going to mention that so-called documentary alien interview. We showed here that the same person that is asking the questions to this Victor character in that documentary, we took the voice disguiser off, and it's the same person asking and answering the
Wow,
questions as the whole thing is one big illusion. And I
interesting.
happen to have done extensive work in puppets, and I can tell you 100% that's a puppet, and not even a very good one. It's
Yeah,
not even a very good one. No blinkers, no brow ridge movement, or I can make a 10 times better alien puppet. I never have, but I know I can because of the work that I've done in that industry. And it's interesting how like these things, but to some people you could show them all this evidence that it was one big fake hoax illusion. They don't want to believe it. They're like, no, that's never been. And people run around saying that's never been debunked. There's one guy still to this day, Ken, that has a Facebook page that harasses me constantly, and he spends every day, all day and night, talking about that one documentary, claiming nobody ever debunked it. It's real. Um,
See, what I'm
Yeah.
saying about Strieber in particular is I don't have to attempt to be a mind reader to know whether he's being deceitful or not. My only point is if it's so obvious that it's a puppet, but he says, wow, that's really the way they move, then that doesn't tell me he's interacting with whatever they are. It tells me he's most likely truly has been mind controlled and he was made.
Traumatized, yeah.
I'm just saying that's a lot more mundane explanation that's really accessible. But now moving on with Strieber, I mean, God, we could talk all night about him. Just a couple more points. So, for instance, the sad, heartbreaking passing of his wife, who he loved absolutely dearly, right? And now all of a sudden, he has a new shtick, right? Which is that he wrote one of his books, which his wife co-authored posthumously, okay? Posthumously, meaning he claims after she died, she co-wrote a book with him, okay? Now,
That's a little far out there, yeah.
and I tell you, I've heard of ghostwriting. This is ridiculous,
Yeah,
But
that I've never heard that. I did
yeah,
not know that about him, or I
absolutely.
would have
So
asked him about that. Like, did you
what
write a
I'm
book
saying is
with your then dead
now
wife? You know?
he's now forget the gray thing. Now he's got an entire new field of phenomena to claim this is my realm now, and I get to talk all about interaction with the dead. And that is one of the things that his latest speculation about what all this has been about all along, the others, the aliens, the grays, his latest speculation and is that it's all about interacting with the dead. Now, that takes us in a very interesting direction, which is when I consider what alleged aliens are telling us, when I consider the experiences people have, the contactees, the abductees, all of that, it just so happens to coincide with my research into what's known as transhumanism or post-humanism or futurism or H with a plus next to it, whatever you want to term it, which is that there's like an unholy trinity. You will never look at those issues very far before you run into a combination of high tech, evolution, and the occult. Can't get away from it. They're all the time. And
Yeah,
so,
they're all
for
seem to be
instance,
connected. You're right.
I
Yeah.
got a kick out of that. You said that you watched his movie in your cabin because his initial claim is that he was in his meditation room in his cabin in upstate New York, and that's when he started having experiences with these visitors. Of course, then later he ends up having the convenient memories about how it's been going on ever since childhood, whatever. And one of his earliest speculation is that they were demons, and I'm quoting his words, not mine. Then let me jump over real quick to Billy Meyer. Okay.
Oh,
He,
but you're gonna get me started on that dude and Michael Horn. I got a history there, Ken.
so he claims he had his first alien experiences when he was living in an ashram in India. And incidentally, to touch upon something you mentioned earlier, he's one of those early hoaxers who took a photograph of the sky, developed it, put scotch tape of the shape of a cross in the sky,
I've seen that photo. Yeah.
the photograph, and claimed that he had this vision that this cross actually appeared in the sky. He took a photo of it. But okay, so now we have a meditation room, we have an ashram, and then pretty much you're not going to get very far into any of these stories if you poke hard enough until you find occultism somehow involved. And I'll give you another example that you know very well, Dr. Greer. Okay, so I'm looking at this guy and
Get me
I'm like,
started on that guy too.
he's
No.
talking about documents that the government has. Okay, yes, let's get those. That's important. He's talking about free energy. Well, that's important. He's talking about pollution. Yeah, and I'm like, okay, man, I got you. Excuse me. I'm like, okay, this guy's saying really good, important stuff that we really need to pay attention to. And all of a sudden, he's like, hey, and if you plunk down a couple grand, you can join with us in the middle of the woods or wherever, and partake in occult rituals to summon aliens. Well, wait, wait a minute, what just happened here, right? So there it is again. Another example, Sean Stone, right? Oliver Stone's son. He was on that show with Jesse Ventura, Conspiracy Theory. They
He's got
go
his
to
podcast now. Yeah, he's big in the podcast now. His podcast is doing very well, actually.
so there's an episode where they go to Skinwalker Ranch. They're there at night, and all of a sudden, Sean is kind of going like this, very quiet. And they're like, "Sean, are you okay? What's going on?" And he says, "I'm summoning the spirits." I'm like, wait a minute, hold on a minute now. This is supposed to be a show about you guys researching UFOs and aliens, and all of a sudden you're partaking in an occult ritual of summoning spirits. I'm telling you, it's unavoidable. It's absolutely unavoidable that if you poke enough at any of these stories, you're going to find some level of occultism. And I know that's such a broad term, but you see by my examples what I mean. And I could keep going, and I could keep going, and I could keep going with examples. And the issue with high tech and evolution, again, we talked about evolution earlier. It's about how, well, in the future, by golly, we're going to end up, or they're going to end up super smart, and that'll grow bigger heads. And then the high tech issue to me is fascinating because for some odd reason, there's what I would say is a non sequitur between high tech and alleged high spirituality. So it's like, because these aliens are good engineers and good pilots and they're able to travel here, therefore, we should listen to their spiritual messages. Well, why? Why assume that they have it together any better than us? I mean, if our astronauts landed on a populated planet, is the fact that they're good engineers and good pilots qualify them to speak on terms of theology? I mean, and why are aliens not?
No, and one could argue that there could be advanced civilizations out there that have all but abandoned religion and spirituality in favor of technology being all they care about, at some point, and they don't have any views on afterlife or anything like that. They're just concerned with right now and technology. So yeah, I've always wondered that too. And it always seems to me that these UFO gurus, it seems like they run out of money or they run out of victims, and they need to broaden the tent. So suddenly they're getting spiritual messages from the aliens, and they pull in the crystal, I call them the crystal hippie bitches, but I mean no offense, the crystal hippie kind of people, and love and light and this and that, and it seems to be all intertwined. Billy Meyer did it. Stephen Greer certainly doing it, bringing in this what he's selling is really transcendental meditation if you look into it, and that's free. You shouldn't be paying somebody for that. And they all bring in spirituality. Corey Good did it. David Wilcock does it.
They did it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's all the same. Incidentally, why is it that there's people who claim that they channel aliens? Okay, let's stop there a second. They claim that they channel aliens, which is very convenient because now you don't have to see anything. You don't have to see an alien. You don't have to see a UFO. Nothing. You can just claim, "Hey, I channel aliens." But why is it their shtick is exactly the same as the people who claim that they're psychics who channel dead humans? Why is it the same exact shtick? I mean,
yeah, and they're always with a funny voice or something, like an American channeler will suddenly have an bad English accent or vice versa.
Yeah, why do aliens always sound like bad James Bond villains?
Yeah. Yeah, but you know what? The one thing about channeling that I will say, though, is that I have a friend who's deeply, deeply into the Urantia book, and it turned his whole life around. Ken, he was like a drug addict and a mess and a criminal. He was a terrible human being. And he got a hold of the Urantia book in prison. And now he is a good father, a provider, a business owner. He is very spiritual. He's very forgiving. He's very generous and loving kind of a person. And regardless of what I think of channeling, the Urantia book is a channeled work. But for some people, there's something in that channeling that appeals to them or is able to help them become a better person. So I always am cautious to just throw channeling into the trash because, who knows? And of course, being a biblical scholar, you know that some people might claim that parts of the Bible were channeled from God. So who knows? But these profiteering channelers, my favorite is this Bashar, who put all of his stuff behind a paywall, because that's exactly what a super advanced extraterrestrial would want him to do. Take those lovely spiritual teachings that are supposed to help all of humanity and put them behind a paywall. So you have to pay to get a hold of them and pay to get the aliens' wisdom somehow. It doesn't make any sense.
So sometimes it's when a person encounters the concept that there is something bigger than them, right? Yeah. It makes them recognize, wow, what I'm dealing with in my mundane little life has to be all that much more important because I'm part of this bigger thing, right? And maybe that bigger thing is a whole deception, but it still has that meaning to them, right? But so let me take us from where we started at the beginning of this, a gigantic circumlocution, all the way back to that, and mention one thing that I think is very important. So as you listen to alleged messages from supposed aliens, if you break them down, right, if you kind of get the core of what they're telling us, and you cut through all the fluff and puff, and there's just tons of fluff and puff, because for some reason, most aliens like to sound like New Agers. I realize they're really telling us three main messages, three main things. And my issue with them isn't that I disagree with those three things. It's that their solution is my problem. So one thing is, hey, you humans are polluting the earth. You're destroying the planet. Okay, yeah, absolutely. I'm down with you on that one. That's a huge problem. Gotcha. You humans are constantly fighting each other, warring over politics, country to country, and even infighting. Yeah, absolutely. I'm down with you, brother. Yeah. Uh, you humans are constantly warring each other over your religions, theology, this and that. Okay, yep, down with that. Gotcha. Like I'm telling you, all three, I'm like, yep, I got you. I'm on board with you, aliens. But then they say, here's the solution. You got to form a one world government and a one world religion, and you need to worship the earth as a living entity, Gaia or whatever. And it's like, oh, well, that's a little strange. How come in the Bible, Romans chapter 1, and especially the whole book of Revelation, how come those are exactly the type of things that we're being told that the quote unquote Antichrist figure is going to be doing? How come that just so happens to match up so perfectly, right?
Yeah, and it's always like love and light and profit, though, to me, many of these people. It's the same reason why I have a problem with people who claim they have superpowers. Ken, there's a reason that faith healers don't work in children's hospitals and psychics never win the lottery. It's deception. And, I don't know. But it's interesting that you think that a lot of this alien stuff is intertwined with the occult and with maybe other spiritual realms. Some people believe that the UFOs are all demonic, right? And the aliens are all demonic.
That because in your one of the celebratory shows you did, you were celebrating some milestone, and I remember you mentioned that you were actually poo-pooing it. That there are those Christians who say it's all demonic. But what I'm saying isn't just like the, Saturday Night Live TV show Church Lady. Oh, I don't know. Could it be Satan?
I remember that. Yeah.
I'm not just saying let's just slap the label demonic on it and be done with it. But I'm saying that there's reasons for it. One of the reasons is some of the examples I gave. You cannot get away from the occult when you're looking at this stuff closely enough and deep enough. It's absolutely everywhere, period. Full stop. And like I said, I could keep giving you example after example. So that's just there. It's not me making it up. It's there. So again, remember how we categorize the phenomena. So could I say all UFO phenomena is demons? Of course not, because we already talked about how sometimes we're talking about secret technology that the government, black ops, a three-dimensional nuts and bolts, flying craft or drones or whatever. So no, that's why it's important to do what we did at the outset. And can I say it's all demonic? Well, again, no, because maybe people were hallucinating, maybe dreaming, maybe seeing a illusion, or just making up stuff because they were really scared by a movie or TV show. So again, but is there an aspect of it that's demonic? I don't see how we could possibly get away with it. Just away from it. I mean, it's literally inevitable. I mean,
And demonic forces are deceptive, right? They would
right,
pretend to be
exactly. So,
angels or dead relatives. Why would they not pretend to be aliens if they thought that that would help whatever
right.
their cause
So,
was?
so a very simple term that a lot of people can understand is a
Yes.
trickster spirit. And it's just like you said earlier. Maybe in one generation, in one culture, they were saying, hey, we're elves. Oh, we're gnomes. Oh, we're your dead relatives. Oh, we're whatever, demons. We're angels. We're aliens. Just change their, it is almost like a Russian doll. It's like you keep going and going, and there's a different
Just
guy
change the
underneath one.
skin. Yeah. Change the
There's some,
appearance.
but I'm saying that there's something there is inevitable. And now let's say that somebody says, yeah, well, I don't believe in all this demonic stuff. It doesn't really matter, because what I'm saying is that the category exists. It doesn't really matter that you don't think it's real. What I'm saying is that the experiences that are being reported to us are categorizable as such, and that there are people who believe that is what's going on, to the point, like I said, that after all these decades, Strieber is saying, this whole thing is really about interacting with the dead. Okay, I mean, there you have it. Again, it's inevitable. It's inevitable.
Yeah. Or maybe he needed something new to sell, like a new
Oh,
angle,
here's
like you
one
were
I
saying.
just remembered from pop culture that I found fascinating. Remember the reboot of the show V? It was
Yes.
very short-lived, unfortunately.
Yeah, I
Very,
was so disappointed they cut that because I
yeah.
was a huge fan of the original show, and in fact, I got a DVD collection of the whole original show and all the
Wow.
miniseries, and I can't wait to watch the whole thing again. Feel like I'm, a kid again.
Now, now the reboot, towards when it got canceled, at the very end, the aliens built a machine that would extract the soul from human beings. What?
Yeah, I remember
Again,
that. Yeah,
like whether it's a supposed real experience, whether it's just sci-fi, whatever it is, how come you can't get away from the occult, no matter where it's coming from? It's there, it's there, straight up.
yeah, and there was certainly maybe some people would think there's some kind of connection with reptilian aliens and demonic entities. The serpent. The symbology is very similar. It's always fascinated me that the reptilians are always depicted as like the bad guy aliens, the adversary.
Right,
Maybe that's not a coincidence. Who knows, But
right.
apparently there are people in government convinced that the UFOs are demonic, some evangelical senators or something that don't want people studying them because they're demonic in nature.
Yes, I remember encountering that, and you know what? Okay, when you think of so many examples, you end up going from, oh, those are just a bunch of idiot Bible thumpers, to going, oh, wait a minute, gosh, maybe they're onto something. You're muted, Stephen.
Pretty interesting about the cultural connections to the occult, because a lot of people don't realize, like Jack Parsons was huge into the occult, rocket scientist, and many things of NASA all use all kinds of weird ancient symbology and occult
Yes.
references. And why do they do that? Just to be
Oh,
mysterious or what?
now that's very interesting. So, take for instance, why do so many of these aliens use the names of ancient gods, goddesses, demons, or whatever? Like example, the Ashtar command, obviously Ishtar. Okay. Or one of my favorites, again, back to Billy Meyer. One
Billy Meyer's your favorite?
of my favorites.
Oh, geez. I had my whole
Uh,
history with those guys.
oh, I know, me too. I mean, yeah, if you post anything anywhere online about Meyer, Michael Horn's going to come and contact you about it.
No, don't say his name out loud
Nope.
because he'll hear us and he'll
The
come
one who
here and
shall not
start
be
calling
named.
me stupid. He'll come here and start calling me stupid, and it's
He
yeah,
told me is that what I posted a series of articles that I then ended up turning into part of the book. And he contacted me and told me what I wrote was so bad he couldn't even bring himself to respond to it. So I took it as a compliment, right? I
yeah,
mean,
that's
come
one of
on.
his tactics. He tells
Yeah.
you how dumb
It's
you
such an
are, and
excuse,
you're
but
not a
anyhow,
yeah.
so one of Billy Meyer's main contacts is Semyaza, right?
Hmm.
Okay, now you look at the pseudepigraphic Second Temple era book known as First Enoch or Ethiopic Enoch, and what is the name of one of the main fallen angels? Semyaza.
Oh, so maybe
You
he
can't make
pulled
it
it.
up.
Maybe he
You
pulled
can't
it
make this
directly
stuff
from
up.
that,
I
right?
mean, it's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah,
I
and I'm
mean,
always
Semyaza, it's always
fascinated
got
that
to be a common name, right? Like, oh yeah,
yeah,
Semyaza Smith down the street. No,
and they always make themselves the hero of this. Billy Meyer's a huge hero. He's bringing these messages to to the world, and Jesus was an alien now according to him, and all kinds of just crazy. It gets, but you're right. Horn is ridiculous, and I think he's mentally unstable. Somebody saying Michael Horn was the angry elf. Yeah, and they do the same thing. They have this pattern where they go to a show, and then if the show is at all critical of them or their claims, then you get harassed by 100 different cult members, or maybe Michael Horn with 100 different accounts. Who knows? For months and months and months and months, it's just crazy. Did you have a similar experience? He came after you because you wrote a not so kind article about the Billy Meyer thing?
I wouldn't say it was unkind. I mean, I was just unpacking the story. So, like, um, yeah, it's part of the book now. But I was just saying, he's sort of like a supposed Buddha figure because the story of the Buddha is that he meditated under this tree long enough and gained enlightenment. But the other story about him is that as soon as he was born, he actually was able to walk and he declared his enlightenment. And it's the same thing with Meyer and the same thing with Strieber. They start by saying, hey, at a certain point in my life, when I was a few decades old, I had an experience. And then conveniently, I'm going to repackage my story and say it goes way, 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 way back to childhood. So you have like two origin stories for these guys as well.
This is a not in the form of a question, but since you have such an incredible knowledge of this demons and fallen angels, Jameson Reese says fallen angels are worth connecting to. They are wise. I would always caution anybody against connecting to anything like a demon or fallen angel. But what do you think of people who attempt to communicate or learn from fallen angels or demonic entities?
Well, it's like putting a neon sign on your head that says, come in, we're open, right?
That's what
Just,
I would agree with you. Yeah.
yeah, take up shop right here. It's a tremendously bad idea, to say the least. And yeah, maybe we'll do another show about that. I don't even want to get started because
I know I didn't want to get you
yeah,
started, but I did want to ask you a selfish question, if you don't mind, about the Bible, since I don't often get to speak to somebody that has done such extensive research into the Bible as you have. And I'm going to order this book that you have on Jesus and a few of the other books, but
mm,
I have a question about the what I call the lost 40 days of the Christ. You know, Christ went into the desert for 40 days before he started his ministry. And he was told to do that. And he was told that he would be tempted. And the Bible is very sparse on what happened in that whole 40 days. Do you have any other sources of what happened during that 40 days or insight into that 40 days?
nope.
Because there you go. All right, well then I'm not alone because I've been looking through everything I can find, the Bible, other sources, non-biblical, lost books of the Bible. It just seems to me that that's such an important story, and they just, like many stories in the Bible, they glance over it and they just quickly mention it, and there's a few paragraphs and that's it. And to me, it was insufficient because I would want to know. I thought that would give some insight into Jesus as man and Jesus as God, because I would assume if it was his human side that they were tempting, perhaps. I don't know. I've been fascinated by that story my whole life and want to know more. And it's disappointing there's not more references to that somewhere.
So I actually just had a paper published in a peer-reviewed journal of Christian parapsychology, and one of the things I wrote about is how to understand how and why demons and the devil do the things that they do, right? So when you think about Satan, and I wrote an entire book just on Satanology, and I started thinking of him in terms of being insane, and that really helped. Because why would he do some of the ridiculous things that he does? It is not just that he's angry or rebellious, so that's part of it, but almost just like completely insane when he's doing things that make a lot of sense to him, but you're looking at from the outside like, dude, you're nuts. And so, if anything, I could just say, look, Jesus went out to be by himself fasting. Satan waits and waits and waits until Jesus is like super weak, really hungry, just desiccated. And then he shows up and says, well, guess what? If you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread, right? Like use your own divine prerogative for your own selfish needs, which Jesus rejects, of course. Then he's like, well, I'll show you the kingdoms of the world and I'll give them to you because they're mine. And incidentally, Jesus didn't deny that. Jesus just says no, right? So that's about all I could really say about it, is that this is about Satan coming to us in our weakness, right? So honestly, if I just can get personal for a minute here, because I do listen to you all the time, and I've been super happy with your ability to abstain from the fire water, you know.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. We're up to 129 days
I
here.
can't tell you how happy I am for you and how encouraged I am. I've never had that problem, but just by hearing descriptions of it, I think it's awesome. And I kept thinking to myself, yeah, well, we are told the devil roams the earth as a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. Now, if I was on lion safari, I wouldn't be getting plastered, because then you'd hear the sound of the lion coming and you'd be so discombobulated, it'd be too late for you to pick up your rifle, aim it straight, and shoot, right? And so, just like the story of Jesus, Satan's going to wait until you're plastered, and then he's going to put some funny ideas in your head, and then you're probably going to act on it because you got to fear.
I've done a lot of stupid things while
Yeah,
under the influence of
yeah.
alcohol. Yeah.
So I just want to encourage you 1,001 times to keep it up, because I think that's really, really awesome, and I guarantee you're inspiring more people than you'll ever know. Even me, who doesn't have that problem, you're inspiring me.
Well, good. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you a selfish question too. You've written like 50 books. Is it worth it? And I mean, like, financially to you, is it worth it writing
Oh,
all those
probably
books?
not. No.
No.
Uh,
You're I'm here writing my first, what I hope will be my first solo book, and that's very discouraging. But I'm going into it with the idea that it's not really for the money, it's to share the knowledge and experience that the book has to
Yeah,
share,
right,
you know?
exactly. So for instance, I was talking to a few authors of fiction, and I was telling them, man, it's really expensive to publish a book. And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, you have to pay the publisher to publish your own book. And they're like, no, you don't. They pay you. I'm like, well, maybe that's because you guys are publishing fiction, where I'm publishing like super obscure theological stuff that's related to pop culture. I mean, like I told you, I'm writing a book series reviewing movies with alien and UFO themes, right? And so for them, it was different. For me, it was like, it's going to cost me a fortune to publish a book, and one of the things of it is once you publish a book, it's like a drop in the ocean. So then you got to put money behind PR marketing, and that's super expensive. So I honestly don't even look at my book sales. I think it'd be too depressing. But for me, yeah,
you're just a like well of encouragement here for a future an aspiring author. Thank you. I thought, well, because your books do range in different subjects. They're all nonfiction from what I saw, but they're all different, strange and esoteric and mysterious subjects: demons, angels, Jesus, the devil, Satan, aliens. But I just thought, because of the sheer number, you're so prolific, having written over 50 now, right? That I thought between the 50 of them, he's got to be good. Well, a couple of them got to sell good. Maybe the others don't, right?
I don't even know. I genuinely don't have a clue. I just don't look at it.
Wow.
But the encouraging part is when I latch onto something that I want to research, all bets are off. I'm digging deep and going beyond the depths, right? So that's part of why I have to be careful how many pans I have on the fire, because it's going to be too much if I'm tackling too much at once. Because if I'm going to research something, I'm going to dig so incredibly deep that it's going to take a tremendous amount of effort and time. And it's very fulfilling for me personally, even if nobody wants to hear about it when I'm done. And like I said, just going through the process of taking in a tremendous amount of information and just letting it stew in your brain, and then those puzzle pieces start coming together and you start systematizing, and then finally you start typing, and that helps you make even more sense, and finally it's out. Okay, it's out. I don't care if anybody, I do care. It'd be nice if everybody bought a bunch of every one of my books, but I'm just saying, part of it is just for me, because if no one else is going to be interested in what I have to say, at least I got to learn something. It was interesting for me, and it was a whole entire process that ends in me having that cathartic moment. Okay, I got it out there. I got it out there. There it is. It's in printed form, so there you have it if you want it. But for me, it's just the process.
Yeah, that's another thing. Every writer that I know is telling me, "Oh, well, Stephen, it's very cathartic to write a book." And so far, it's been a lot of suffering to me, because I have to have all these sources, and I have to show where I got the. It's not cathartic. It's a lot of work here, and my worry is that nobody reads books anymore. So maybe I'm wasting my time, and I should just make a video instead of writing the book.
Part of it is when you're writing nonfiction, it's an entirely different experience than if you're writing fiction. God bless those people writing fiction with their character development and mood and setting and all that stuff. Good for you. I can't do that stuff. So I'll give you an example. When I wrote a book titled Nephilim and Giants as per pop researchers, where I'm basically critiquing all the top guys in the pop level of nephilology, I plowed through about 80 books. Okay. There, the black one right there, that's volume 1.
Yeah.
And when I was done with the research, I ended up with 400 pages just worth of quotations from those books. And then it happened to coincide when all the stay-at-home orders were starting for that certain virus,
Yes, that we don't talk about here.
So it happened to coincide with now I'm staying home and I have a lot of time to just sit there and write and write and write and write and write. But for instance, just a little window into what the research is like, I had 400 pages worth of quotations, and I had to figure out where am I going to stick them, in what chapter, in what order. And that was tremendously tedious. I mean, that was like mind-numbing tedium, like unbelievable, hours upon hours and days after day of just doing that. But then when I started writing what I wanted to comment before and after, put it together. See, that was the more pleasurable thing. I got to not just start writing, right? That was enjoyable. But yeah, it can be tremendously tedious. else. But
Yeah,
in,
I don't know
in the
how. I
end,
guess I'm
it's
sorry,
when
you're
you look
breaking up a
back,
little
you're
bit
like,
there.
wow, that,
Oh, yeah, you froze up
you see
there,
the little
Ken.
spinning
Yeah, we were buffering
video
for a moment there. Sorry
stream.
about
So
that. Oh,
something happened
before
again.
I forget,
There
I want
goes
to
again.
mention that put I put Ken's YouTube channel in the description of this
After I
video, and also a place where you can the Amazon search link, so you can see all of his
back,
books, his many books. No
I'm with
matter
you.
what strange things you're into, he probably wrote a book about it. This guy, so make sure
No,
you guys support him. You know, yeah, I think we're buffering maybe. Yeah, I think let me try this. Hold on one second. We'll try to pull him back in. Nope, buffer. There we go. Maybe that did it, or shut down anything
yeah,
open besides
yeah. I don't know what
StreamYard.
happened.
That sometimes does it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Walter
They're
Bosley is
after us,
here, another
man.
author.
It was
Yeah. Walter Bosley, another author, is here, and he turned me on to this
it
place
wouldn't
called
stop
Lulu. Is a printer and
right
distributor to be
before
your own
you.
publisher. Yeah, we appear to have a big delay here now too, along with the buffering. But yeah, we're running out of time, so maybe we'll cut it here. I want to thank you for joining us, and invite you to make sure that you come back and we'll talk a different subject next time. This was fun. I appreciate you being
And by the
here.
way, oh, I'm totally honored and I had a blast. And one thing I love about your show, incidentally, is that every one of your shows has 4 endings. You're like, okay, good night, everybody. Oh, and you know what? Let me mention, you go on for 15 more minutes, and they're like, okay, we're going to call it a
Sorry,
night.
yeah,
Oh, and I got to
I'm
leave.
not good at the wrap up.
You go on 10 more minutes, and I get
Oh,
such a
that
kick out of
reminds
that.
me. Yeah, I do have to do that. I was
There you
gonna.
go.
Yeah,
See,
you're right.
see,
You're
that was
right.
one ending. Now you're going to have at least one more.
Okay, well, I'm going to let you go, and we'll invite you to come back another time to talk a different subject. I'd really like to delve into, I have an interest in this demonology and exorcism and possession and all of that stuff. But hopefully, I have time to get a few of your books and read them before your next appearance here. So I'm going
Okay.
to do that, and I'll be in touch. Thanks for being here, Ken.
Yeah, contact me and we can set that up. I'll cut you a deal. So,
Okay, thanks, Ken.
okay, good night and God bless you all. Thanks so much.
All right, good night, Ken. Boy, that was interesting. What an interesting individual. I am going to check in with the super chats. We make it a point here. We read every single one of them, and sometimes we forget to do that. So yeah, we did read them all. We have Lord Ludicrous, interesting conversation, really enjoyed it, and Mr. DB Cooper, ask Astral Citizens if he ever accepted cash payments from Secure Team 10 when he had his channel that was called Lions Ground. Investigate that, Stephen. Boom. Yeah, I'll ask him about it again, but I believe I've already heard the story, as I mentioned. Jameson Reese is here. And by the way, Jameson, I would be interested in hearing your opinions on all this stuff. And you're right, I do view things from a Judeo Christian perspective. I was raised Catholic and went to Catholic school. I had 10 years of scripture study and theology taught by Jesuit priests and brothers and nuns of different orders. So you're right, I have my own lens through which I see things. But I did have a long period in my teenage years and later in my early 20s where I read every book on the occult that I could find. I think that I was actively trying to fill in the blanks of what was missing from what I felt like I learned from the Catholics. I wanted to see the other side of things, see other perspectives. I got into, pagan religions and Buddhism and other religions and meditation and ceremonial magic, and everything that I could read, I did for a long period of time. So Simon Fly is here and says, great guests, and we want to thank Simon Fly. And Mystery Eon is here and says, please remember to like and subscribe. And yes, I would be a terrible YouTuber. And I'm sorry to cut it short like that on Ken, but it seemed like it wasn't going to recover from whatever his buffering issues. I'm interested in having him back to talk about more spiritual and call it the dark side of things. He's got a whole, I'm going to show you guys. Oh, this is, like I said, occasionally in conspiracy land, I meet a really strange and interesting character. And I love strange and interesting characters because I'm a strange and interesting character. Um, so Ken has written all of these different books that are just the titles alone are fascinating to me. And I'm going to be ordering a bunch of them. Luckily, I just cleared some room on my huge bookshelves in my basement. I'm going to be working on my personal library. And I would like to have some of these books for reference. Look at this. What does the Bible say about the devil and Satan? Stylized Satanology. Here's one. Cain as serpent, seed of Satan. On the Genesis 6 affairs, sons of God, angels or not. There's a famous part of the Bible in Genesis 6 that refers to the sons of God. Like the sons of God saw that God created earth, so previous to humans, there was a different sons of God. And many theologians, philosophers have discussed what was meant by that Bible verse. Were these angels? Were these pre-Adamite humans? What were these sons of God that were there to behold and witness the creation of earth? That stuff has always fascinated me. And here's one that would certainly interest me because I have a crazy interest in the Nephilim from the Bible, the giants of the Bible, which were reported to be the sons of offspring, or excuse me, the sons of unions between the daughters of men, human earth women, and fallen angels. What does the Bible say about giants and the Nephilim? A styled giantology and Nephiology. That's looks like a great book. Here's one that I would certainly be interested in. Is Jesus the Messiah? A Judaism versus Judaism debate. Always fascinated by that because according to Catholics and Christians, Jesus hit all the markers. All of the prophecies were fulfilled by his coming. And I've always wondered why the Jewish people rejected him or did not accept him as the Messiah. I'm sure that book gets into some of that stuff. The splitting of the pineal gland. This guy writes a lot of books, man. I wonder, and here's the book that we were talking about today, 50 Shades of Grey, Aliens in Consideration of Aliens. Billy Meyer, Eric Von Donigan, Robert Temple, Travis Walton, Whitley Strieber, Ancient Aliens, Manly P. Hall, and more. And yeah. MUFON research specialist and author of Beyond Science Fiction said that he's got a lot of quotes here from some of them. He provokes the reader to consider all aspects of the situation that many may overlook because it may interfere with our preconceived ideas that, knowingly or not, we want to prove. This book talks about the founder of the CE4 research group. Oh no, Stephen Greer, right? So I encourage you, the link is in the description of the video. You heard him say that he's not making a mint here writing all these books. And that's a little sad and unfortunate to me. And this is the Anarchist Cookbook of Styled Satanology. That's another book on the devil. Yeah, interesting stuff. The apocryphal Nephilim and giants, encountering the Nephilim and giants in extra biblical texts. There is a lot of references to the Nephilim that are in the so-called lost books of the Bible or the Book of Enoch and other things that may shed more light than the Bible did on the Nephilim. And here's on Jesus, Mythicism myth on Jesus' existence, mythicism, pagan copycat, marriage, tomb, and beyond. So he has written, and look at this, the pastoral Nephilim and giants. What do pastors teach and preach? Yeah, amazing that Ken has written this many books. Now here's where it gets into other books, not his. So it's really just the first page of the search that I have included in the description of the video here. So I'm going to be buying some of these books, and I encourage you to do the same.